A day after I arrived in LA from Seattle, I was reading the Rain Man script, which I loved. It made me laugh and it made me cry. It was such a beautifully written story of brotherly love. It was indeed a contrast from the brutal film I'd thankfully left behind in Thailand. Sidney Pollack, who directed several award-winning films, including Tootsie and Out of Africa, was originally on board to direct the film, and Steven Spielberg before him. But for some reason, neither of them could make the script work as a road movie. I believe Sidney Pollack wanted to include Hell's Angels at one point along the way to introduce more action and jeopardy to the story. But Dustin Hoffman, who'd already been cast as Raymond, wasn't in agreement. Fortunately, Barry Levinson ended up with the script, and he saw the value of developing the relationship between autistic savant Raymond Babbitt and his younger brother Charlie, played by Tom Cruise. It was decided that filming would begin with Charlie meeting Raymond at the home in Cincinnati, where he lived. Then, because Raymond refused to get on a plane, Charlie was forced to drive him to LA via Oklahoma and Las Vegas. With the two main characters cast, Barry asked me to help the casting director, Lou DiGiamo, find supporting characters for the film. Since most of Rain Man was going to be shot on location, it seemed to make sense for me to try to find actors in the areas where we were due to film. So within a few days, I was heading off to Cincinnati, Ohio, where my friend Dawn happened to live. However, I didn't stay with her, but was lodged in a very nice hotel where the production office was also based, and I was supplied with a rental car. I'd previously been in contact with talent agencies in Cincinnati and Cleveland, and sent a list of the characters I would need for scenes in Ohio, as well as adjoining states of Kentucky and Indiana. So as soon as I arrived, I set up audition sessions and saw several actors from these agencies, but sadly none were appropriate. Realizing that I would need to reach out to the general public, I got in touch with the media, who were happy to interview me and promote a casting call I would be holding at a Cincinnati sports hall. This would take place from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. on the following Saturday. When I arrived at the building at 8:30 a.m. with my two assistants, I was happy to see a good-sized group of candidates waiting eagerly outside. But this was just the beginning. More were to come. Once inside the large sports hall, my assistants handed out forms and took Polaroid photos of the applicants who hadn't brought along requested photos. I then interviewed each person to see if they might be appropriate for one of 8 minor speaking roles in the film. 8 hours later, at 5 p.m., when we were told by the operators of the sports hall that we had to leave because they were preparing for a wrestling match, the building was still filled with applicants, and many more people were snaked around the outside of the building. It had been important for me to speak to every person individually, but at this point, I had to abandon the personal touch. There just wasn't enough time. So I grabbed a megaphone and announced to those in the hall, and then those outside, that I was very sorry, but we would have to end the session. I said how much I appreciated them turning up, but all I could do now was to go along the line of people waiting, and if I saw anyone who I thought might be right for a role, my assistants would get their information and arrange an audition. I apologized profusely that I had to do it this way, but I had no alternative. I really hated pointing at some people and not others, and seeing the disappointment on the faces of those I hadn't chosen. But I tried to be as nice as I could about it and continued to apologize. Over 2,000 people had attended the casting call, hoping for a stab at stardom. It was quite an eye-opener for me and gave me an insight into the lure of Hollywood and celebrity. Now, this was well before social media, where now everyone's a star. I recognize that even having 5 minutes of fame can change a person's life in so many ways. Perhaps it's the idea that they've been chosen out of so many to shine and to be noticed. It's given them an opportunity they never thought possible. Being in a film is something most people who are not in the industry, of course, would never dream of. But given the chance to experience what to many people seems the glamorous side of life, can uplift and bring unexpected rewards. I saw this later when I was casting in Oklahoma, Las Vegas, and Los Angeles, which I'll tell you about at another time. I would say one of the biggest joys for me on Rain Man was when I had to find 50 developmentally disabled individuals for scenes in the home where the character of Raymond lived. The set decorator Linda DeSena and her assistant were going to a group home to look at artwork that the residents had done and which could be used in the film. I went along with them so that I could meet some of these special needs individuals, and frankly we were all rather nervous as we entered the group home. I know that might sound strange, but none of us had any experience with people who had physical and mental differences, and it was almost as if we had a fear of the unknown. It was that, really. We didn't know what to expect, and I think we were a little afraid of saying or doing the wrong thing, being disrespectful. I met with the manager of the group home, who I'd already spoken to on the phone about the needs for the film. I was looking for high-functioning people with personalities. She led me to 6 young men and women in a large living room, some of whom were in wheelchairs. Even though the manager knew I was there, I wanted to tell the residents myself so that I could get a sense of their understanding and reactions. I'm not sure they fully understood, but they were nonetheless joyful. I spoke to each person individually, and although communication was limited and I was still a bit nervous approaching them, I soon began to see how truly special and different each person was. They were all absolutely unique. I wrote down names and descriptions of each person in my book and then added a Polaroid photo of them. I was particularly drawn to a young, red-headed, rosy-cheeked, blue-eyed girl called Cindy, who was in a wheelchair. She only had the use of one arm and couldn't speak. Oh, but she could laugh. She was so happy. I loved her right away and knew I had to have her in the film. I wrote her name down, then took a Polaroid and began to place the photo in my book. Then when I looked up, I saw that her laugh had been replaced with a very unhappy expression. I was horrified that I may have done something wrong. What did I do? I asked the manager. Oh, Cindy thought you were going to give her the photo, she said, but don't worry. Oh, it's no problem, I said. I can take another one, which of course was very easy in those good old days of instant Polaroids. I asked Cindy to smile again, which she did willingly. Then I handed her the photo. She almost leapt out of her wheelchair with joy, and then suddenly grabbed my arm and started kissing it. This sweet and beautiful gesture warmed my heart, opened it up really. It was a kind of breakthrough for me. Instead of going with my preconceived idea that people with disabilities were somehow different, I realized that, first of all, yes, they are all different, but it's those differences that make them the special human beings that they are. The phrase, "Don't judge a book by its cover," comes to mind. We all have hearts and souls and the capability to love. And it's truly connecting with another person's spirit, really seeing who they are inside, that's important. As I continued to visit group homes and workshops where older special needs individuals were spending their days placing something like coloured Formica tiles into boxes, I met an amazing group of kind and loving people who I was pleased to be able to cast in the film. Chuck Schwartz was a man in his 50s who I met when he was compiling different shades of blue for mica tiles in the workshop. We formed a friendship, and we wrote to each other for a number of years after the film had been completed. He sent me gifts he'd made in leather class, a comb holder and a bookmark, and he drew pictures that were childlike, but which I treasure. Eventually he was unable to write, but a carer would write on his behalf. Billy, who had Down syndrome, was a real character and would say the funniest things, having the cast and crew in stitches. He loved to hug, which he did regularly to almost everyone, adding, "I love you." This was true of other people cast in the movie who also happened to have Down syndrome. They were full of unconditional love and were a joy to be around. I have another story about the extraordinary gifts of Tom, who was an autistic savant, just like Dustin Hoffman's character Raymond. But I'll keep that until next time. If you're enjoying my episodes, my social media guru, Horatio, has asked that you please like the recordings, subscribe, and ring the bell to be notified when I post my next episode on Sunday. Many thanks, and your support is greatly appreciated.